Having just observed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and as Black History Month approaches, I'm reflecting on the legacy of the women who integrated professional wrestling in the 1950s. I was honored to interview Ethel Johnson and Ramona Isbell, two of the extraordinary Black women who broke racial and gender boundaries for the documentary that I directed, Lady Wrestler, the amazing untold story of African American women in the ring. At the time that I began working on Lady Wrestler in the mid-2000s, I was a reporter at This Week News, a string of community newspapers affiliated with the Columbus Dispatch, the daily newspaper in my hometown, Columbus, Ohio. Unfortunately, This Week News is permanently shutting down in January 2023. Here's a look back at some of the experiences I've had writing for This Week over the past 20 years. I'll also share how my work at This Week was key to how I came across the story of the Lady Wrestlers. I started at This Week in June 2001. My close friend Tara Stubbs Fagursky helped me get the job. Tara and I both started out at the Call-and-Post, Ohio's oldest and largest Black newspaper, and we followed each other from journalism job to journalism job. Tara put in a good word for me, first at the Daily Reporter, a local business newspaper, and then at This Week. One of the lessons I've learned from working at This Week is that people of different races can indeed get along. Tara happens to be white, so when she got hired at the Call-and-Post in '94, she was the only white person in the newsroom. We later switched places at This Week, where I was one of a few people of color working in various roles at the community newspapers. I grew up in an interracial family with 3 white step-parents and 4 biracial siblings, so fortunately I was already accustomed to being around different kinds of people. I interacted with people from all walks of life throughout my career at This Week, which spanned from full-time employment beginning in 2001 to later becoming a freelancer right up until the day that the company closed. In 2005, I was still working full-time at This Week News when I contacted one of my regular sources for story ideas, my friend Terry Anderson, who at the time was working in public relations at the Greater Columbus Arts Council. When I contacted Terry, he mentioned that there was a really interesting lady that I should interview. That lady ended up being Ethel Johnson, the first Black women's wrestling world champion, who earned that title in the early 1950s. And along with her older sister, Babs Wingo, who was the first Black woman professional wrestler in the United States, and their younger sister, Marva Scott, these phenomenal women made history. It's been my honor to document their story, and as I found out, Ethel's daughter Shelley had been trying to get the amazing story of her mother and aunts out into the public consciousness and get them their proper recognition for quite some time before I contacted Terry. I was born and raised in Columbus and have lived here my entire life, but even I didn't know about these trailblazing Black women until that fateful conversation with my friend Terry in 2005, and it was because of the reputation I'd established as a journalist with publications like This Week News and the Call-and-Post that Terry trusted me to tell the story of the Lady Wrestlers. Women like Babs, Ethel, and Marva represent the best of what my city has to offer. They're historical figures whom we should all take pride in. And something that immediately stood out to me when I began working at This Week News was the sense of community pride that people in Central Ohio have. I grew up in Columbus proper on the east side, and This Week was circulated in the suburbs surrounding Columbus. I covered upscale Central Ohio suburbs like Gahanna, Upper Arlington, and Bexley. Through meeting people in these places, I learned that if you ask someone where they're from, they'll say, "I'm from Gahanna," or "I'm from Bexley," or "I'm from Upper Arlington," rather than simply saying, "I'm from Columbus," like I would. It reminds me of how people from different boroughs of New York City will say, "I'm from Brooklyn," or "I'm from the Bronx," instead of just saying, "I'm from New York." Over the course of my reporting career at This Week, I felt like I became a part of the communities that I covered. My last freelancing assignment for This Week was covering Bexley, and I attended city council and school board meetings and reported about developments going on in this city within a city of 14,000 residents. It was cool but a bit surreal when at the final council meeting that I covered in December 2022, Bexley Mayor Ben Kessler presented me with a proclamation acknowledging the 9.5 years of service that I put in covering the community. As I told Mayor Kessler and council members upon accepting my proclamation, we journalists are supposed to report on stories. We're not supposed to be the story, but I appreciate the recognition nonetheless. Working at This Week has enabled me to meet a cross-section of Americans without having to run for office or go to prison to do so. It's become a cliche that in our polarized, hyper-partisan political environment, we should reach across the aisle and fellowship with people whose views differ from ours. Working at This Week enabled me to do just that. I've made lifelong friends of coworkers and contacts across the ideological spectrum. Colleagues with whom I've had heated debates about politics have done really cool things to support me, such as attending my grandfather Bob's funeral in August 2004 and attending the debut screening of the Lady Wrestler documentary that the Wexner Center for the Arts at The Ohio State University hosted in March 2018. In addition to the suburbs, This Week also circulated in various parts of inner city Columbus, and I covered the South Side for several years. Covering the South Side showed me, once again, what a sense of pride people have in their communities. People will quickly correct you if you misspell or mispronounce the name of a location, street, or some other community landmark. For example, growing up in Columbus, I always thought that Kossuth Street was pronounced Kossuth, but someone informed me that the name is Eastern European and it's actually pronounced Kossuth. You learn something new every day. And I definitely learned a lot from my time at This Week News. In part 2 of this video, I'll share the unlikely activity that I learned during my tenure at This Week. It's an activity that's not necessarily associated with Black people, but one that I continue to do to this day. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you'll tune in to the next installment. I just wanted to share this photo of my last photo assignment at This Week News. Now, This Week had a talented staff of photographers, but occasionally I would take my own photos to go with my stories. And this is a photo of Bexley Mayor Ben Kessler with his dog Oben. I had written about a new dog park that is opening in Bexley, which is on the east side of Columbus. It's going to be opening this spring. And this is not the final photo that ran with the story, but I was sorting through photos and just found this little candid shot. And I just love this photo and wanted to share it with you. This was, as I said, my final photo session with This Week News before the company closed. We've had a really schizophrenic winter here in central Ohio. Sometimes it's really, really unseasonably warm, and sometimes it's freezing cold. Welcome to climate change. This was a day in early December that felt like a fall day. It had rained and it was really muddy, and I almost ruined a pair of dress shoes going out to this dog park, but I love this moment and I love that I was able to capture it, and I just wanted to share it with you. If you like this video, please leave a comment, share it, and subscribe to my channel. It reminds me of how people from different boroughs of New York City will say, I'm from I'm from Brooklyn.